Okay, VSE, let's see. Well, the organic matter shows a little bit low, but again, kind of got to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt because of the method.
Well, but the truth is, it has been nothing but weeds except for in 2005 they grew beans on commercial beans with chemical fertilizer.
Okay, but how did the weeds look? Were they nice and lush and thick?
I never actually saw it. I mean, but I didn't know. I just heard it. We talked about the field. I said get a cover crop on it. And so they went out and cover cropped it this fall. They took the weeds off as hay to use for compost, and they went in and cover cropped it.
Okay. Yeah. And what's the cover crop? Kind of brine vetch?
We did. It was a mix, but the vetch, of course, went spectacular. The cover crop was not our best cover crop. It got probably about that high.
Okay.
Yeah. But then the vetch got that much higher on top of it. Because we hit the vetch with tea this spring.
Oh,
and
okay.
It's just like crazy. Yeah. So there should be
it
much better now.
Needed to fix more nitrogen. Okay, phosphorus is definitely on the low side. But you look at the NCDA, the index is 41, which really isn't bad.
We've actually added phosphorus there. We added about a ton to the 4 acres. No, not even half. About half to 3/4 of a ton. It's just whatever I have in here. Colloidal phosphorus.
Okay. Yeah, well, that was probably a good plan.
And that was last fall.
Yeah. Potassium is, well, again, your cation exchange capacity is quite low, so it must be a sandy soil again?
No, I think it's just, it's a mix, actually. It's not very sandy. It's clay loam and sandy clay loam, like, you know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
pH is really in your optimum, but the clays must be a very low cation exchange clay because
well, actually, we probably want to look at it. We probably want to look at the actual diagram because there's one section that is clay, and I bet you if we go there, it's higher.
Yeah, it could be a little higher.
So I'll see if I can find one that is.
Although clays in our region, especially the red clays, don't have a lot of cation exchange. You get most of it in the organic matter. So that confirms the low organic matter. That's where you want to build, which is probably not surprising to you.
Right. No, we totally know where to build it.
Yeah, the magnesium's a little high relative to the calcium, but again, I wouldn't worry about it. You don't have to line. Sulfur is very low. That's where the compost again comes in. With the phosphorus and the sulfur low, I would say just very generous applications of compost and cover crop.
Yeah.
Zinc is low. We look up, but that's interesting. A&L considers zinc low, but the NCDA has the index of 109, which is just ideal. Similarly for copper, so we tend to think that you may not need to add micronutrient supplements. One way to test that is to do a foliar analysis on the crop. And if you have good mycorrhizal activity, you'll probably get enough of those nutrients in. Manganese is a little low, it's 13. Generally, when that gets down to 10 or less, you really begin to wonder if you might need a supplement. And if you have either the soil or the foliar or both showing low or very low or deficient in the case of foliage, the National Organic Program does allow you to use a sulfate supplement, like a zinc sulfate or a manganese sulfate, whatever nutrient is needed. So, but I would say that at least at the outset, for the most part, you can rely on generous use of a good quality compost to bring those micronutrient levels up. The boron is very low.
And we can do that foliar because we already have crops in there, so we can do a foliar, right?
Oh yeah, you could do like compost tea or fish seaweed sprays are good. You know,
yeah,
like
we do fish seaweed all the time with these crops.
Oh yeah, that'll help.
Compost tea with fish seaweed all the time.
Oh good, that'll do it.
So that means we won't need to adjust. We probably wouldn't try and adjust the boron until fall. Then we probably would just go with the tea.
It depends. If you have brassicas or beets, I would go ahead and put a pound or two per acre.
No, it's actually all it's going to be out there is going to be sweet potatoes, squash, beans, and corn.
Yeah, I would skip the boron.
Yeah, just go with the teas. I mean, they're going to get tea once a week probably.
Yeah.
Tea with fish and seaweed in it.
Mm-hmm. What is B34? Was that meant to be the greenhouse 3 and 4?
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. Exactly.
They misread the 3 as B. Okay. Okay. That one has very low potassium too. It's like 1% or 44 parts per million on the A&L Oh, here, they called it 334. Okay. Yeah, pH 7475. Again, that's that non-leaching, non-rain issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now here, the cation exchange is kind of high. One thing, if your pH is above 7, you can have an artificially high cation exchange reported if you have what are called free carbonates, just calcium carbonate and magnesium carbonate hanging around your soil, basically lime, free lime. And because they don't directly measure the negative charges on your soil, they just add up the calcium, magnesium, potassium, and then they make an adjustment or correction for how much hydrogen you have based on your pH. And they add that up and say, okay, your cation exchange is thus and so. It's a calculated estimate.
See, I expect them to be high in there anyways, because they regularly get compost.
Yeah.
They regularly get at least undersown cover crops. And last fall, we put like 2/3 of the greenhouse into cover crops for the entire winter.
Yeah.
You know? So I would expect them to have decent cation exchange capacity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now for this one, for 334, boron 0.7 medium is probably sufficient for most crops, but those few that I mentioned that are prone to deficiency, or if you wanted to get a top quality, top yield tomato crop, it really wouldn't hurt to do either a pound per acre broadcast or maybe 1/10 of a pound per acre sprayed right on the plant.
So if you're doing, can you give us the measurements for row feet? Like if it's a 3-foot bed?
Row feet, well, 150 row feet on a 3-foot bed would be 100th of an acre.
100th of an acre, okay.
Yeah.
So that's 100 foot a pound. All right.
Yeah. Okay. So, any more questions, or want to do anything else? Probably getting close to time, aren't we? Oh yeah, we're at time.
Yeah, we're at time. Yeah.
Let's see if there's anything that's. Okay, I just have a couple of diagrams that show classical deficiency symptoms.
What was it? We'll close to that.
So what?
We can all pull in close because there's so many of us.
Right. When the nitrogen is deficient, is the older leaves turn kind of evenly yellow. They don't have a lot of strong patterning. And one thing about nitrogen, the legumes are a really important source. I mean, that's partly why I spend so much time on cover crops. And also, there are vast stores in the atmosphere that can get converted by the nitrogen-fixing bacteria, both free living and legume. And any soluble soil nitrogen is easily lost.
By the way, we were talking about putting a pond in at our new greenhouse site.
Yeah.
And the NRCS was there, and they said, if you put a pond in, you will probably take care of your nitrogen needs and your phosphorus needs from the rainwater that comes off the roof.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because there's enough nitrogen if you're collecting it in a pond coming from the rain.
Wow.
Yeah. And the phosphorus, they said, just the bird shit. Enough nitrogen.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. I don't know if they're right, but they were saying that. And we already they weren't trying. They didn't have to sell us the pond. We already wanted the pond.
Mm.
You know, we wanted it just so we wouldn't have to be pumping groundwater to water the greenhouse.
Yeah. Now, I have a somewhat different approach from what John was talking about, trying to get those carbon-nitrogen ratios so low in your finished compost. But soil life uses about 25 to 30 pounds of carbon for every pound of nitrogen, so that when you add residues with the C/N that's above 30, you'll tend to tie up nitrogen. That's like if you till it in. Now, it doesn't mean if you take straw at 80 to 1 and use it as a surface mulch, you're not going to tie up much nitrogen, a tiny bit right at the interface. But if you then till that in, you will tie it up. Organic residues less than 25 to 1 release nitrogen. Like when you till down an all-veg cover crop, you can get a terrific flush of nitrogen. So that when you feed the soil with a mix of materials that have that C/N in that 25 to 35 range, it's like a balanced diet for the soil life, and you build the most organic matter. If you have it higher than 35 to 1, it's going to kind of spin its wheels burning off excess carbon. And if you have it below 20 to 1, it's going to be carbon limited, and it's going to be spewing out extra nitrogen and not building as much.
See, I think where John's at with that is in so much of the compost, the high carbon nitrogen ratio is determined by the fact that there's a lot of wood in there.
Right.
And that's not going anywhere. You know?
Yeah, well, actually the wood is, you know, the carbon may not be that active. I mean, if it's very recalcitrant. I've actually had horse manure wood chip mixes that were 35:1, and you could smell the ammonia coming off of it because there wasn't enough active carbon.
See, the wrap that the look piece gave is when it gets in the soil, fungi just kind of wrap that, they just grow completely around that wood. They're happy to be there, they love it.
Yes.
They're in no hurry. They'll spend, you know, years and years on that piece of wood. The thing is, they love nitrogen. So they're tying up nitrogen to break down the wood.
Oh.
You know, that's, I mean, I've experienced, I got soil compost that John Nielsen brokered, but they, after they sent the soil report to us, the test, they then cut it with wood. And so I put it in the garden and I got hammered. I mean, it's just like, my nutrients were just dead in the water.
Well, if you put it with fresh wood, yeah, you're going to have active carbon. It's going to tie up the nitrogen.
Yeah, well, this was, you know, I don't know how fresh it was. Anyway, I know why he worries about it, because with wood we've had problems with it. You know?
Well, that sources of nitrogen. I think you spend much time on that. Okay, this is the trick of budgeting nitrogen or organic farming. It's tricky. I mean, at the garden scale, I often, you know, this whole thing will feed the soil and, you know, let the soil process take care of the plant's needs. But if you're going to be trying to make a living, you got to get yields up to a certain level. You have to pay more attention to this. And one thing that's often forgotten or has been neglected in conventional agriculture is to estimate the nitrogen that's mineralized from soil life. And then you can count about half of the nitrogen, half the total nitrogen in your cover crop on the whole for legume or legume grass mix. Manure, again, about 50% of the total nitrogen is present. Compost, it's only 10 to 25%. And then if you need more to get up to your threshold, then use things like feather meal or blood meal or, you know, fairly available end fertilizers that are organic. Now, I personally still like to think in terms of total nitrogen because really this 20 pounds per percent or soil test soil organic matter, that's rather conservative. It's based on research in Cornell. And that may not be too far off up here because the climate's relatively cool, but for like Piedmont Tidewater, it's going to be higher. Especially if the soil life is active. You get a very active soil life with very low organic matter. If it's a sandy soil and you're feeding it every year, you're not going to build up the organic matter percentage, but you're going to maintain your soil life, and you're going to get a lot of nitrogen back. You can easily, a healthy soil should mineralize 100 to 150 pounds of nitrogen, and that's most of what you need. You still have to replenish it. You have to replenish it, but that's where I look at the totals. When I put a compost on that's 1% nitrogen, even though I know that only 25 pounds are going to get to the crop, I count the whole 100 pounds because I say, well, the other 75 is going to come out of the soil and we got to put it back. That's what the more recalcitrant nitrogen in all these inputs is good for. Whereas if you put out, when a conventional farmer puts out a soluble nitrogen fertilizer and says, well, I can only count 70% of that, or manure, fresh manure, well, I only count 50% of that. A lot of the rest is indeed lost. It goes up or down. So fresh manure, I would say, is not true, but the legume cover crops, well-aged manure, and compost, any nitrogen that you don't get right away, you get long-term. It's a different approach, but I think it's one that a lot of organic farmers use. Okay, phosphorus deficiency. Have you ever stuck plants out a little bit early in the spring and it's a little bit chilly for them and they turn purple on you? Tomatoes especially, yeah. That's a temporary phosphorus deficiency because the root system is so cold it's not fully functioning yet. If you get this at a time when it isn't because you put a transplant out in chilly weather, then you may well be short of phosphorus. Most of the soil phosphorus is in insoluble mineral and organic forms. And one thing that's inefficient about conventional phosphorus fertilizers is whenever you flood the soil with soluble phosphorus and you don't have enough biological activity, it will get bound up in the mineral complex. It's harder to break out that mineral fixed phosphorus than organic fixed. Now some mycorrhizal association can break phosphorus out of both, but you really want to keep it in the organic cycle as much as possible. mycorrhizae are vital there. I mentioned that several times. And so if your phosphorus is low, like on some of those tests have tested moderately low, like 20 parts per million, and you add, let's see, starting 100 pounds per acre of phosphorus every year, and you're only harvesting off 20, you won't necessarily see that phosphorus number rise right away. You're filling up some of the mineral and organic fixation capacity. But then once that's filled, it'll rise. And I think that on our soil, we may have been bankrolling some phosphorus, and our soil life can access it. It just doesn't show up in the soil test. And as long as the crop is getting enough, that doesn't really matter. The main thing I'm watching is once it gets to 50 parts per million, I'm going to want to cut back so I don't go into the excess zone. You can lose phosphorus and runoff and erosion because it's in the soil fines and the organic matter and the clays. It's the most limiting fertilizer nutrient worldwide, and it's such an irony that our Chesapeake Bay and some other bodies of water are choking for excess phosphorus. And it's one of the pitfalls of organic farming. It's easy to say, oh, okay, I've had success with manure compost, I just put on every year. And if that's your major source of nutrients, you will build up phosphorus because you won't harvest off what you're putting on. So you need to get to be fixing more nitrogen and using more plant-based compost, which will be higher in potassium relative to phosphorus. Tree leaves and chip brush are good for that.
Potassium,
yeah. And I know what you're saying about those fungal wrapped wood chips. We have wood chips once they sit around for a year, just thick, ropey fungi. And I've heard those are actually quite beneficial, and I've used them on the strawberries, and they go nuts. I mean, they're not hungry for anything.
Yeah,
We've had good production for 4 years running, and you're not supposed to be able to keep them for 2 or 3.
we use them on top or in the soil?
On top, and they break down quick enough.
Yeah, no, they break down pretty quick if the right stuff is there for them.
Yeah.
But if you put it in the soil, it'll tie up nitrogen.
Oh yeah, I've seen that happen at one farmer close by. Okay, we're going to go to sources and put that up later. I've pretty much beaten this one to death about the nitrogen-phosphorus balance. One trap that we fall is that cool season heavy feeders, especially early spring crops, need the nitrogen faster than even a really good soil can release it. Ron Morris and I had this friendly debate once. I had some broccoli plants in my garden that grew beautiful big plants and then put this pitiful little head out, you know, like 3 ounces. I was so disappointed because the plants had been so wonderful looking, dark green and everything. And I said, Ron, I overfed our broccoli because it didn't give us any yield after putting this beautiful foliage. He said, well, you didn't have enough nitrogen. And I said, well, every organic production text I've seen is if you got all these and no production, you got too much. And he said, I can guarantee it wasn't enough. And then I looked at some data that he had. He took the same cover crops that I've been growing, rolled them down, planted his broccoli. No nitrogen, 50 pounds, 100 and 150. I mean, he really socked the feather meal and the Chilean nitrate to it, just like. And that yield curve went just straight up linearly. All the plants are beautiful and big, but the ones with 150 had the heads like this. And I said, well, okay, you're right.
What I always do with broccoli is come in right when they're starting to bud.
Yeah.
You give them a major nitrogen foliar feed.
Oh, well, like a fish meal.
Yeah, and then they just kick.
Interesting.
You wait till they're just about to bud.
Yeah.
You know, and then you just lay it out. It's cheap that way. You have to do it all the time. You know?
Yeah. I was visiting one of my community bays. I had my whipping broccoli again this year on nice big plants, little tiny heads. I was visiting my neighbor right just a few steps from our house, and we were eating outside, and I looked out, and there was this row of broccoli. Big, fat head. I mean, the plants were twice as big as mine, and the heads were like, you know, monster.
7, 12 inches, yeah.
Yeah, it's about 7 inches probably, and still growing. They hadn't reached maturity. I said, Beth, what's your magic with your broccoli? I honestly can't grow this stuff. And she said, I planted it in a window of aged manure. And I said, just don't tell the FDA. And I'm sure it was fine. It was, you know, but well-aged manure, and it was from pastured calves. So. But anyway,
she probably doesn't have immune deficiency. Isn't old. Isn't a little kid.
No, she's a little kid, but she does have a 7 or 8-year-old son now. 9, whatever.
But
anyway,
they've probably been eating that kind of stuff for a while. That's
right, yeah. And so on these early season heavy feeders, you probably will want a supplemental nitrogen source. Or if you have tilled down or had winter kill a pure legume cover crop or a radish cover crop, you might have quite a bit of nitrogen. In fact, somebody suggested that's one of the reasons spinach thrives after radish, is the radish sequesters the nitrogen and then lets it go again as it breaks down. You plant spinach early enough that you get it before it leaches away. And so that's very interesting. But then I learned, yeah.
Go ahead. I was going to ask Pat if cauliflower was the same as broccoli.
Even more so.
More so?
Yeah.
Okay.
All
But it's got
grass.
so many other things that can go wrong. I mean, cauliflower just is like.
I'm growing cauliflower and it's doing great. So
Good.
this is my 3rd year, and
Uh-huh.
I'm the only farmer at the market that has it, you know.
Uh-huh.
But I'm getting heads like, you know, nice size and everything. But
What
You give them a
variety?
foliar feed just as they're starting, they'll probably do better.
yeah,
Yeah.
variety is, well, I'm doing graffiti, the purple one,
Uh-huh.
and I'm doing the white one that they just, I can't remember now. It was Gypsy, I believe, and they stopped doing that one and they switched the seed to something else, but I can't remember one of them. Johnny's, I think, stopped.
You're doing spring, summer, and fall, or spring and fall?
Just all spring right now. It's coming off, you know, great guns right now.
We're doing,
You need to feed it then again.
Well, you'll
yeah.
get even bigger heads.
Yeah, okay.
so that's interesting.
Don't
Just
feed it. Don't feed it a lot until it's starting to cup, because then
Yeah.
you get too much, you know. But then when it's starting to cup, it's
Yeah,
just
it's
going
all,
to,
yeah, you know,
Yeah.
everything inside, the
Yeah.
leaves inside, the smaller leaves start to turn in
that's
and
when you
get
feed
ready
it,
to
yeah.
go.
Yeah. You know, and compost tea with fish seaweed, boy, boom. You know.
Oh, wow. I'll have to remember that.
Yeah.
Well, then, just last year, one time, actually a little bit after that, we were out looking in the field. There was some pepper plants that were really tall and dark green and a little slow to fruit. And I said to Ron, I said, you know, you can't overfeed things organically. And he said, well, in the case of pepper, I think I agree with you. And then last year, this is so amazing. We had some pepper plants, and I overfed them. And I did it by simply cutting down a very tall cover crop. It was rye and veg, about 50-50. And taking, and I didn't test this, I didn't analyze this compost, but I assume it was pretty low analysis because it was just, you know, low-grade, homemade, throw everything together, turn it once, and be patient. You know, a little bit of manure, but mostly kitchen scraps and weeds. So take this rough compost, you know, a little handful down each hole, stick the plants, and no-till even. I mean, I didn't even till the cover crop in, so left there as a mulch. These plants grew like that tall. They were almost black. They were so dark green. It wasn't a disease black. It was a healthy dark green. And I only got about 3 peppers per plant. And I had these little pathetic anorexic plants down by the fence where the soil was poor and I didn't get around to watering them often enough. And they also gave 3 peppers per plant. I had the same yield off of the
But are you sure they weren't cold stunted?
ones down by the fence.
Any of them? If they, you know, if you drop below 53, peppers start stunting.
Those are the rye and veg were not stunted. They were this tall.
But no, but the stunting is in the fruiting. The plants get gorgeous, but they don't fruit until
We planted
late.
late. We planted late. It was a hot summer.
Okay,
I don't think it got almost 63
then they weren't
also.
cold stunted. No. You planted late in a hot summer, you were not cold stunted. But that can throw you off on peppers. If they drop below 50, they get really stunted. But I just learned from going to Market Newsletter a few years ago when they had those comprehensive articles about vegetables, that they start stunting at 53 degrees.
See, what I heard was that what happens when they get a cold shock, and ours certainly did this year, and they're looking great, but what you get from a cold shock is you get a little wave of early fruit set, and then you get a hiatus, and then you get another wave.
Yeah, well, I totally witnessed that one time with eggplant at my farm. We always get late frost, and I covered to protect. I mean, late cold, not frost, but
Yeah.
end of May, early June, blackberry winter kind of stuff. I covered them just to try and keep it above that temperature, and there was enough wind to blow off one row of eggplant. And I went out there in early August. I thought, wow, I'm going to really do great in eggplant this year because I had light picking of eggplant. I didn't see another eggplant on that row until the end of October.